What's up, guys? So today on the podcast, we have Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith was, most notably on the show Fight Quest back in the day, and he was one of the color commentators. Do you call him color commentators?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's what he was.
Announcers? I don't know what you would call it. Basically, he was like...
Maybe it was there. I think there's a difference between color commentator and play-by-play guy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Probably, I think he could do a little bit of everything.
He was an entertaining guy in the fight game, basically. I mean, he still is, but he was, he would call the fights in the UFC and Bellator, and he was very entertaining to listen to explain these fights and as they were happening. And again, he had, as you'll hear in the podcast in just a second, he was, an MMA fighter, and he did jiu-jitsu back in the day, back in the old school days with like team punishment stuff. So I won't give too much away, but it's an interesting podcast. I always love talking to people that come from that era, that earlier era before things were like nice and what they are now. Obviously, we're going through the quarantine right now, but this is back at a time before everybody knew what it was, before there was money in it, before it was just a bunch of crazy people in the wild west of martial arts doing this thing because it was kind of cool. So again, I think you guys are really going to enjoy this podcast. It's a fun one. So again, stick around and listen to it. Big thanks to Charlotte's Web. You can check out their website at charlottesweb.com, and you can save 15% on the order with promo code Chewjitsu. Again, Charlotte's Web they were like our first sponsor that we brought onto the show. And again, it came about pretty simply because we were using their CBD products, and we sort of talked to them, and they were like, yeah, that sounds cool. So we brought them on as a sponsor for the show. And so again, I really enjoyed their CBD products. I think they're high quality, and I use them, especially, I've been talking about this before or during the whole quarantine thing where I'm not working out nearly as much. Like when I'm training most of the time, like when I train, I get so tired. Like people tell me I have trouble sleeping, right? People say, "Let's Chewy, I have trouble sleeping." I'm like, if I'm working out, I have no trouble sleeping. It I don't fall asleep. I like power off like a computer, and it's like I just turn off. So exercise to me has always been a huge part of being able to keep a good, healthy sleep cycle. Well, I remember when the quarantine first started, I was like, oh my God, dude. It was like you could just tell that things were a little different. And so, I had to be really militant because before I would sometimes skip my CBD. Sometimes I forget about it one night or something like that, and like this time I put it like right next to my bed. So I was like, I had to be militant about it because when I took my CBD, I was much more relaxed. Sleep seemed to come a little bit easier. It was much more calm and sort of relaxed, especially at the end of the night when I was reading and going to sleep. So again, for any of you guys, whether this quarantine is going on or not, I would encourage you guys to check it out and give it a try. Again, everybody's a little different, so some people use it and they don't get the same effects, but again, it's a really useful tool for me. And so again, check it out and give it a whirl. Also, big thanks to our sponsor, Epic Roll. Matt over there at Epic Roll makes basically any jiu-jitsu gear that you're kind of interested in wearing, whether it's gis, rash guards, t-shirts, any of that stuff. He makes that. Anytime I wear one of his t-shirts, it's an instant hit with whatever. Like I remember I wore it in one of my YouTube videos recently. I wore it in a couple of the Instagram posts that I made, and it's like an instant hit. And so again, I really dig his t-shirts. All of his other stuff's really good too. But I like having those like t-shirts where it's like nobody else knows what they're talking about. Like, so if you wear one of his t-shirts, like the average lay person is not going to know what is this, a triangle choke? What is this? A sushi roll? Like nobody's going to get it. But with jiu-jitsu guys, it's like you get it. So it's kind of almost like it's back like when we used to wear tap out stuff and people knew what tap out was, but like the average person, this is like back at like 2002, 2003, you would wear tap out, people knew what it was. It's kind of like that. It's like having this like shirt that puts you into a club or this piece of clothing that puts you into a club. But anyway, you can check their stuff out at epicrollbjj.com using the promo code Chewjitsu, 15% order. Or 15% off the order. And then we got a new one today. And I know you guys are like, Chew, you're talking about too much stuff. Well, don't worry about it. It's okay. We're going to get to Jimmy in just a second. But we got this new one. A guy, he recently started this. It's like a jiu-jitsu version of, I don't know. You can tell me because we both played it. It's almost like Uno.
Yeah.
It's like a jiu-jitsu version of Uno. So it's these cards, and you'll see things like stack passes and scissor sweeps and X guard and full guard and all this kind of stuff. And it's called Jugo, Jiugo, Jugo. And so, when I got the cards are super cool. Like the artwork on it is really neat.
Yeah, that's the first thing that stood out to me was the artwork. And James, who created this, is like he did all the artwork himself. Like there's a lot of thought that went into this, and basically it's kind of like having, it's kind of like Uno, or kind of having you're playing a certain hand, and so you're starting with a takedown or a guard pull, and then you're having like a pass, a control position, a submission, and the more cards you link together, the stronger your attack is, and then you have an opportunity to defend. It's kind of cool. It's really, for me, I love board games. I love card games. So it's just really cool to see something that's got some jiu-jitsu inspired, things in it. But the artwork to me was just like, because I'm not much of an artist, and it was just so cool because every position or every takedown has like a certain picture associated with it. So it's kind of creative.
Yeah, the other night Jess and we played it, and because we were trying to, the rules. There's obviously more rules than like the average card game.
Sure,
like you're using jiu-jitsu positions. And
yeah,
stuff.
which is complex.
Yeah, right. But afterwards, it was kind of neat, and it involves cards and a dice, like a 6-sided dice. But Jess and I were playing. We killed about an hour playing it.
Yeah.
Sadly, I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but sadly I could not beat her at judo. She beat me twice. Whatever.
It happens.
I think the one we had one match that went like dead even, and the second one was beat me. But anyway, if you wanna check out the card game, guys, it's at jugoplay.com. So it's JIUGOPLAY.com. Promo code is Chewjitsu, and that's 10% off your order on a deck of the cards for the card game. So. And as always, guys, if you want to support the podcast, check out our Patreon. It's at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Inside that, we have, literally 2 years. I mean, we're how many podcasts? 100 and what?
This is 105.
105 podcasts. So we're 105 podcasts, and each one of those podcasts has extras as far as conversations with the people that we've been talking about. A lot of some of them have we'll record like kind of a, I don't want to say a secret, but like kind of like an inside type thing, and they'll talk about it, and that goes on the back in there. We also have a seminar that I did that's in its full length. It's up there. We have some stretching and warm-up stuff for jiu-jitsu up there as well, just as some extras. So there's a lot of content in there that you can check out. Again, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And again, it's inexpensive. It's, how much is it, Eugene?
23 1/3
23
penny.
So for less than a quarter a day, you could be getting that, but you're not. But you're not doing it yet. You should be. For your, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Somebody's sending me a penny, by the way.
What?
In the Kyle Watson podcast. Somebody sent me a really nice.
Shut up.
Really nice email, and I told them, if you want a shirt, send me a penny. But they had a great story about, I think it was this guy's uncle hated pennies, and so all the family would always give him pennies to mess with him. And so he sent me this story, and it was great. I'll have to like read it on one of the podcasts. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for the support. But here's
do you have the story now?
Yeah, I could.
So let's read the story at the end. So guys, if you listen to the whole podcast, listen to us at the end, and we'll read that story. But we'll see how Eugene got a penny. Anyway, guys, with all that said, let's get into the podcast with Jimmy, and hope you guys enjoy this one. What are you up to these days?
Well, I trying to keep busy. I'm working for ESPN International. I'm doing a weekly thing for them right now. Sports Center Fight Camp is what I do, and I do it right from here, from my home. So I'm hosting that right now because the normal, usually I do color and that kind of thing, and the host had a baby, so I'm stepping in hosting that. And then I'm doing SiriusXM at least once a week for MMA Tonight, but it's ended up being a lot more than that because I'm filling in for Luke next Tuesday, and so SiriusXM and ESPN International are on 2 gigs right now.
I want to know a little bit about just working for Bellator. How did all that come about for you?
Pure dumb stupid luck. That's exactly how it came about for me. I did a show called Fight Quest for Discovery Channel.
I remember that one. Yeah.
It's one of my favorites, man. Me and my dad would watch it all the time, and it was just the coolest thing.
Thank you, man. Thank you. That's how I started out, man. Doing anything entertainment-wise was Fight Quest. That was it. I kind of got that out of the blue once again. And then I was shooting Fight Quest, and I got a message from a guy named Jerry Millen, who used to be the VP over at Pride. And he said, I'm doing a show or promotion called M1. Can you go to Amsterdam next Wednesday? And I went, yeah, sure, no problem. I had a passport, no problem. And he goes, okay, we want you to be we're going to try you out as our color commentator. I said, okay, sure, no problem. And flew out there, did it, first time ever, and got the gig with M1. And then M1 was starting to kind of wind down, and a few of the people that I worked with at M1 went over to Bellator. and they were looking for a color commentator, and they said, hey, you should try this guy. I did a phone interview with Bjorn, got that, and then worked for them for 8 years before the UFC. That's how it all came about, man. Just one guy said, hey, you should use this guy, and that was it. So it was really kind of an opportunity that kind of dropped in my lap, and I made the most of it.
Yeah, tell me about Fight Quest now. Like that, when you were doing that, you know, let's kind of, how did that start? You know, just going backwards from the very beginning. Like, what made you want to go? I'm going to go to this crazy different country. I'm going to learn this martial art I'm really not even familiar with, and I'm going to fight some dude in those rules, like with a week's training, correct?
Yeah, we had a 5 days total training. I didn't come up with the show. A lot of people thought I produced it or was my idea. It was nothing like that at all. An old teammate of mine who has passed away, Joe Camacho, apparently told my coach and a few other people, hey, there's this show out that they're trying to do for the Discovery Channel. Here's a producer's number in New York. Give them a call. They want to talk to martial artists that can do the show where you travel around and do different martial arts. And I went, yeah, sure. Well, actually, there's more of a backstory even to that, which is weird. Like, it's just one of the weird things in life. I fought a guy named Jason Chambers, who was the host of this show called Human Weapon.
Yeah,
right?
I remember that, yeah.
So what happened was the promoter of this show called Pangea, which is a local show in California, called me and said, hey, man, can you fight in the co-main event of my show against a guy named Jason Chambers? And he was like 14-2 or 14-3 at the time. And he said, now check this out. He goes, he's about to host a show called Human Weapon for the History Channel, where he goes around and does all these different martial arts in all these different countries. And if you beat him, he's going to be pretty well known. That'd be great for your career. That's how it's sold to you when you fight a guy who's 14-2, right? And I was like 5-1. This is going to be great. I always tell guys, like, there are great opportunities and easy fights. Those are the only two ways a fight is sold to you. If you're on the B side, it's a great opportunity if you beat this guy, meaning he's way more skilled than you. Yeah. And then if you're the A side, it's, we got to scrub for you. Easy fight. Those are the only two kind of fights you ever get sold. So for me, it was a great opportunity, right? And so he explained to me the show this guy was going to go around and do. And I remember going, man, I'd love to do that, and being like super jealous. And I went, yeah, sure, I'll fight the guy, whatever. Well, I fought him. I beat him with a heel hook in about 2 minutes.
Nice.
And yeah, great. And then, but his leg popped pretty good. It popped pretty bad. And I said, so like 2 days later, I get this call from my coach saying, yeah, they're looking for people to do the show. And he described the exact same show. And I went, I fucked his knee up and they're looking for somebody to replace him. And I went, oh, I felt really bad because, one thing, the fighter code is like, well, we'll hurt each other. We'll beat each other up. You don't want to take food out of somebody else's mouth. You don't want to be like, cost them their next fight or like their career. Like I'll beat your ass into the ground and I'll injure you if I have to, but I don't want to be the reason you don't work. All right. That sucks. So I thought, because he described that, oh, Jason hurt his knee and they're looking for somebody else. And I was like, oh my God, I felt terrible. And then I did the audition and I knew that his had started filming already or something. And they were like, yeah, we're going to start filming in November. And it started dawning on me that it was a different show for a different network with this exact same premise, which is just weird. It's super weird. And a lot of people thought I was chosen because I beat Jason. I'm telling you, the producers had no idea. They had no – I told them. So they were like, yeah, there's another show called Human Weapon. And I went, yeah, I fought that guy. And they went, what? And I go, yeah, no, I fought him. I beat him like a month ago. And they were like, you're kidding me. I said, no, it's just I did. And so – they were thrilled. I kind of got this random audition, and I my degree was in history. That's what I studied when I was in school at UCLA. And so that's my mom. I can call her back later. So anyway, so what I did was, like, the night before, I had taken like Southeast Asian history. I had taken Russian history. I had taken all these different kinds of things. So what I did was they just point a camera at you and they go, okay, pretend you're doing this style. Go. All right, you're in Brazil right now. You're in Russia right now. Well, I knew all the styles already because I trained quite a few of them, but I also knew the history of all these countries. So I would make up a place that was behind me, like a temple that I had studied or something like that, and pretend that's where I was. So I'd give the history of the country and where we were along with the style, and they were like, that's great. You're our guy. It took about like 10 minutes, and they were like, okay, cool, wonderful. We'll find somebody else to go with you, and they found Doug later, and that's how I got the gig, man.
Nice. Now, man, we're kind of going like we're jumping all over the place, but I remember, I remember back when you were in Bellator and stuff. I remember my buddy Brent fought for him several times, and I went up there with Brent a couple times and was there coaching him. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Long Beach, California.
Okay, cool. And then how did you get started with like mixed martial arts fighting back then? Because you're fighting like you're talking about these fights, and it's like this is like what year is this around?
I'm old.
Yeah, I mean, this is a long time ago. I mean, this is before it was like ultra popular. This is kind of a bit before. Like, how did you get into MMA fighting and all that stuff in general?
Yeah, well, I was a wrestler in high school, and never a standout state champ or anything like that. I just wrestled in high school, and I went to UCLA for school, and they didn't have a wrestling team at UCLA. They had a club where guys who had wrestled in high school or whatever would get together and we just wrestle. And so I'm up there one time for this wrestling club, and a guy goes in there and goes, "Oh, you look like a good wrestler. You should come to my jiu-jitsu class. It's in this room at 7 o'clock." I didn't know what he was talking about. This is 1998 or something. And I went, "Yeah, sure. I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll try it." And it was like wrestling, so you'd hurt people. So I would just like get half Nelson and just crank it. And the guy would tap and I'd go, "Oh, I guess I win. All right, cool. Awesome." So I loved it. I immediately fell in love with it and started doing it all the time. And so I started hooking up with people at UCLA who had similar interests. And we would rent out a racquetball court. Like, what movie is that? What Van Damme movie did they fight in a racquetball court?
Lionheart?
Lionheart?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Lionheart, yeah, because he fought. Yeah.
Hey, he fought in a racquetball court. So that's what we did. We'd rent out a racquetball court and have like a fight club in there, like with a bunch of martial arts and stuff. So, yeah, I got into it in college in like 98, 99. So then I was driving through Huntington Beach after I graduated in 2000, and I saw a sign that said jiu-jitsu, and I pulled over and I said, "I'd like to sign up." And it ended up being Team Punishment. It ended up being where Tito Ortiz and all these guys were training at the time. I had no idea. And people asked me, because I got pretty good pretty quick. And people asked me, like, what kind of the secret was. And I said, in those days, in the early 2000s, late 90s, everybody went through Team Punishment at one point or another. And all they would say was, "Hey, what are you doing after class?" And I would say, "Nothing." And they go, "Okay, Dan Henderson's getting ready for Renzo Gracie and Pride. So you're going to be our fifth dude in this rotation. And your job is to just try and get Dan down to the ground with Dan any way you can, because Renzo will pull guard. He'll do all kinds of stuff. So go. You're number 5. And so as they would train guys for stuff, I was just like the third warm body or third, because they go through these circuits and stuff, and they go, "Well, we need a fresh guy to spar with him. Get in there, number 5." And I was like, okay. So I had no choice, because I was like, "Hey, throw right hands at Chuck Liddell, and he's going to slip all of them." All right, sure. And so that's how I jumped in there, because so many guys went through there. They just needed warm bodies to do stuff, and I was one of the warm bodies that did stuff. And then I started fighting.
Did you know? I mean, that's a pretty big deal. Chuck Liddell, Dan Henderson. Like, did you have an inkling of an idea that how kind of big MMA stars these guys were? Yeah,
I did. And also, but like on any given day, like, "Hey, how you doing? What's your name?" "Hey, I'm Jimmy." "Hi, I'm Eve." And it was Eve Edwards. I was, "Okay, grapple with Eve." All right. So I did know how big they were, but also a lot of them weren't big yet. And a lot of them became big later and all this weird stuff. And Antonio De Souza, names that aren't, maybe that big, but were bad dudes back then, if you remember Antonio De Souza.
Yeah.
And yeah, so some of them were big, and also you didn't know on that day who would be there. You had no clue. So you didn't really have time to even process what was going on. It was like, "Hey, all right, this guy's here. He's getting ready. His name's Jason Miller. Just do this." "Okay, I got it." So I did know how big they were, but also you didn't really have time to get starstruck. These people are trying to rip your legs off or, knock your head off. So you just kind of went, "Oh, okay," and jumped in and did what you could. And I was so raw at it, and I didn't know any better, or didn't know anything, that I didn't really have time for it to get to me. But I met at that time, man, just about everybody, really.
Now, how was the training for you back then? Because I know that, like, when I started doing jiu-jitsu back in 2003, I'd wrestled in high school, got into jiu-jitsu 2003, started getting into MMA and stuff. And I mean, back then, the methodology of the training was just sink or swim. They just throw you in there and get you going. How was the training out there at the time? Was it similar to that, or was it different? Or
where did you start? I'm curious.
I started out here in Kentucky.
Kentucky, yeah. One thing about the West Coast, it was light years ahead of everybody.
Sure.
It started like all the Gracies went to the West Coast. So another thing that was interesting were like tournaments were big, like Pan Americans were big and Copa Pacifica was big. And, you know, I'm fighting guys from Machado and Hickson and like every freaking week. And so another thing about the West Coast Jiu-Jitsu time, I remember guys coming from the East Coast for Pan Americans, for example, you know, they all come from the East Coast for the big tournaments. And I was a blue belt and I'm smoking brown belts. Like, I mean, I'm not tooting my own horn. It was just, that's where we were at the time. It was like, unless you were like Henzo or like, you know, some school in the East Coast that was really far ahead, the West Coast was just, I would take guys from these, hey, I'm from Florida and I'm a brown belt and I was kicking his ass. And it was just, at the time, the West Coast was where everybody went to train. It was where everybody in jiu-jitsu originally ended up. And then they kind of diffused out from there. So you had Paragon, Hickson, Machado, you had like just every Baja Grace, you had every big school. I mean, there was so much competition that to get a medal was like, man, you really worked your ass. That was part of it too, is that tournaments just, there were very few small, like getting to know you tournaments back then. It was like the rest of the country has caught up to the West Coast in a lot of ways, but like imagine like there were only big tournaments out there. So it was really sink or swim. It was, man. It was, the competition was really, really high, and probably not as high as it is now, but still like really brutal. And so that's where I started out, man. Just, you had to perform or get your ass kicked, and you felt like crap all day. Yeah.
Did you have any, like, you know, feeling like you could maybe even be decent at MMA, you know, wanting to fight with the training with the guys that you train with? Did you feel like, even at your jiu-jitsu level, did you feel like, man, I could maybe do something pretty big in MMA?
That's a tough question. Because the way I saw it at the time was like an exercise to see what I could do. It was like, hey, let's see if I can really put this together and really do it. Because MMA is as close as you can get to a street fight without hitting somebody with a bottle, right? It's about as close as you can get to the ultimate form of combat. Sure. And so I just wanted to see how I could do. The idea of looking down the road and really being a professional and really like, man, I'm going to make money. You couldn't really make money back then. Like, it's just like, that's another thing that people don't appreciate. I get asked every now and then, you know, oh, why'd you quit fighting? I'm like, I made to heel hook Jason Chambers, I made $1,200. You know, I had, you know, so there wasn't any money in it back then. Like, there were no Conor McGregors, there were no Ronda Rouseys, the Ultimate Fighter didn't exist. These guys weren't on Wheaties boxes. So it was hard to make money unless you were the ultimate top of it. And even then, by today's standards, they didn't make money. So we didn't realize how far you could get. We didn't think about, like, I'm going to get to this level, because that level didn't exist at the time. So a lot of people just were kind of like me, like, hey, let's just see this is kind of fun. This is new and interesting and weird. And, you know, so it was more like skydiving or something. You know, you don't make money skydiving. You just do it because you find it thrilling. That's kind of where I was, because we didn't have any $1 million paydays back then. When you fought Jason Chambers, was that on like an Indian reservation? That was one of the first sanctioned shows in California. Okay. I only fought on two sanctioned shows. And that was one of them. It was at the Palladium in Hollywood. It's a big club out there. Okay. And that was sanctioned. Other than that, yeah, it was all Indian reservations. Yeah. So it was weird. Like, they came up to me because rounds, the number of rounds and the length of the rounds was always all over the place. Like, promoters would go, hey, it's 3-minute rounds, so they could pack in more fights back then. So they would like shorten the rounds, or say like, it's 5-minute rounds, we're only having 2 rounds. And a lot of times you didn't know until you got there, you know, and they were like, okay, it's 3-minute rounds. And you're like, all right, shit. So I remember I got there, and the commissioner comes up and he goes, how many rounds and how many minutes did you agree to fight? And I went, I don't know. I look at the contract, I don't know. And he started arguing with the promoter. You didn't tell him. And I go, they never tell us. It was weird that the guy was upset about it. Like, you know, I had never had anybody ask me that before in my life. So, and the guy goes, here's your check. Before I started fighting, you know, the commissions hold the checks. I was used to promoter, like, you got to go find him in the bathroom and go, where's my money? And he's, all right, I got to go to the car. And like, so it was just like this weird experience to actually have a commission, make sure everything was legit, was like weird, you know, but that was it. I only fought in 2 of those.
Okay. Yeah, man, those old fights, they were crazy. I remember watching like one of the old King of the Cages. I think it was number 7. It was like called Wet and Wild, like it's raining.
Wild,
and
yeah.
they're just mopping it up and everybody's slipping around and fighting.
Awful.
Oh my gosh, it was ridiculous.
Paul Buentello, Rico Rodriguez on that card.
Yeah.
Eve Edwards fought on that one. That's a notorious one in the history of MMA.
It's amazing to me that was that one outside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so they didn't have there's no covering, like they didn't anticipate whatever. How were I'm curious. There's so much the structure now to the weigh-ins and kind of the pre-fight stuff. Like, can you give us a little bit of an example of like what maybe the weigh-ins were like at an Indian reservation, or like how
They're
you
on a bathroom scale. They were on a bathroom scale in the lobby of the hotel. So, like, you would show up, and, Ted Williams was promoter for Gladiator Challenge. He helped out with King of the Cage, too. You showed up there, and you stepped on a bathroom scale, and you went, all right, good. That's it. That was it. Like, you stepped on the scale, and you went, all right, good. And I heard rumors, once again, never saw it with my own eyes, but there was a guy that I fought who sold a lot of tickets. I didn't have any tickets. He sold a lot of tickets, and he told me a story about how he turned in his ticket. He weighed in, and then he turned in his ticket money to the promoter. Like, okay, I sold 300 tickets. Here's the money. And then he gets a percentage of that.
Sure.
And the promoter went, oh, man, I didn't know you sold 300 tickets. You didn't have to weigh in. Like, looked at him and goes, oh, if you had showed me some money before, I wouldn't have given a shit. Because nobody was checking. So I heard rumors about guys, he's a big ticket seller, they don't have to weigh in. Or, you showed up and they'd go, all right, you're fighting middleweight tonight. You had a middleweight drop out. Your opponent dropped out. You're fighting middleweight. Dude, I'm a 55er. Hey, you want to fight or not fight?
Yeah, it's crazy times compared to them.
They made it up as they went along. There was no regulation. Yeah,
it was the Wild West for sure. I always like hearing those stories from the guys that were back then, back in the old days. So, like, getting into the announcing part of it and doing the color commentary stuff during the fights. What is that like? Because again, it's always fun to see the guys actually do it who fought, that actually experienced it. Because there's a lot of guys that did not fight and they're fans and stuff. What is that like, seeing it and then announcing it, doing the color commentary, and actually like doing the play-by-play of the fights? Having that perspective that you have.
You got to think ahead, man. So there are a few things of. God, what was I watching recently? It was an old wrestling match between one of my favorite wrestlers, Kerry Collat, and a guy named T.J. Jaworski in the Nationals in 2000. You know those guys.
Yeah, I know
Collat. Right, yeah, Collat is like my favorite wrestler of all time. Anyway, and T.J. Jaworski kept trying to finish his single leg, and he couldn't do it because like Collat has rubber knees, like no joke. It's sickening to watch that guy wrestle. And the announcers kept going, God, he can't finish. He can't finish that single leg. And I went, tell us what he needs to do. Tell us what he's not doing. And I, like, as a commentator, I'm sitting there going, what does TJ need to do? You're not explaining that at all. And I get frustrated too when it's like this, boy, he's hitting him with the right hand. He's hitting him with the right hand. He's hitting him with, yes. So the guy needs to what?
Yeah.
Move your head, keep your hand up. So what you try to do, or I personally try to do, is like, I try not to give you a question without an answer, or an answer without a question. Like, you don't want to, my God, this guy's wrestling sucks. His wrestling sucks. His wrestling sucks. Okay, well then tell me how he needs to improve it, or why, if his wrestling sucks, is the other guy not taking more advantage of that? There are a million answers and questions throughout a fight, and you have to know which way to go. And the example I give a lot of people is the Tyson Buster Douglas. Was Tyson overrated? Was Tyson having a bad night? Was Douglas having a good night? Was Douglas underrated? All those things could maybe be the narrative. You don't know, but you have to give the audience a sampling of those things and go, okay, make up your own mind. Okay, maybe Tyson was never that good. Boy, it looks like Tyson's having an off night. Boy, Buster looks great. Well, his mom died. Maybe his mom died has something to do with that. So it's not up to me to give you one narrative, but to go like, okay, here are all the things that are happening. Here's what I would do if I was his corner. Here's what I do if I was the other guy's corner. That is a big part of it, is you got to kind of swim between all these narratives,
Yeah, and when you do it, like, you're really good at it. And is that something that like kind of maybe came natural to you, or is it something that you really like started to? Obviously, it's a skill that you made better, but was it something that you had to maybe consciously take a lot of effort to work at to improve?
I used to be a teacher. That's what I did.
What did you teach? History?
12-year-olds, 7th grade. I taught them math.
Oh wow,
so math teacher. Yeah, no, it's the worst. Don't ever do that. My degree is in history, so I did occasionally teach history, but I was teaching math at the time.
Okay.
And so it's weird because when I started doing television, they would tell me, man, you're really good at breaking stuff down, explaining. I said, that's what I used to do. I used to explain algebra to seventh graders. And I hear all the time from people in television that essentially you want to speak like you're speaking to middle school kids. That's about the level in TV where you want to be. Mm-hmm. That's literally what I did all the time, was explain things to middle school kids. So breaking things down, explaining things in a way people understand is just, it's universal. If you can do it for that, you can do it for anything. And so teaching seventh grade math really helped me become a much better commentator, because I can take kind of a complicated thing and hopefully break it down in a way people understand. And the hard part about MMA is you don't want to dumb it down for hardcore fans, but you don't want to lose casual fans. You don't want to explain a heel hook to death to where, an experienced fan knows what that is. A beginner has no clue. So that's a line you always have to ride, man, every time.
How is it like working for Bellator, making that transition and then, moving up to seeing these amazing fighters or, top tier fighters? How was that transition for you? What was it like working for Bellator, being kind of still, they were kind of growing with the UFC kind of being the, I think were they around when Pride was still going on, or was that a little bit after Pride, I think?
Now, Pride was around.
When did Pride end?
Maybe the first year of Bellator, Pride was around, but I didn't work the first year of Bellator. By the time I was there, Pride wasn't around anymore. So, it was crazy. A big part of it was they had the tournament system back then.
Yeah.
And they had weekly events. And that was something you really had to keep up with because it was seasonal. So for 3 months, I was on the road every single weekend. And then I had 3 months off where I did one show per month. And that was my life. So the interesting about the tournament system is there wasn't any time to build up any one particular card or any one, because it's there every week.
Right.
And this is before the UFC was doing shows every week. So a big part of it, I remember one time Mauro Ranallo had this fight show up in Canada, and every now and then he would call me to do like a breakdown of the next Bellator. And so he said, hey, break down this next week's Bellator. And I did my whole spiel. And he said, all right, now 3 weeks from now. And I went, oh crap, I don't know what's happening in 3 weeks. I'm doing this every week. I don't know what's going on in 3 weeks. So I had to pull up my computer and get that fight as he's, doing the intro there and bring it up, and then I could talk about it. But it wasn't like, UFC 250 we're going to hear about for, a month before it happens probably. Sure. Bellator didn't work that way. It was like bang, 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 bang. So you were almost always like readjusting to whatever was going on that week. And I also had this guy, Sean Grandy, is an amazing broadcaster, join me a couple, 2016, I think he joined, 2017, I forget which one. And he called me one time and he goes, yeah, the bout sheet is out for this next month's card. And he started asking me questions. I started laughing my ass off. And he said, what? I go, throw that thing away, man. That show's in a month. Half those guys aren't going to be there and aren't going to make way. Like you're wasting your time doing all this prep. He was from the NBA. We have the schedule a year ahead of time. And I go, set that thing on fire, man. You can't do that. So part of the trip with Bellator doing weekly shows is like, when do you get invested in a particular show? When do I sit down and start studying? So I do it 2 weeks ahead of time. The fight card might change before then. I've wasted all this time, and if I wait till the night before, it's too much to do. So it's like about a week out, I would start studying and stuff. But that weekly schedule of Bellator, that grind, man, you learned a lot because you were always doing shows all the time, and I was their only guy.
Yeah. Now, how was your training back then? I remember like with the couple shows that I went to with Brent, they would have the mat set up, and there was one time I actually got to roll with you. This is a long time ago, obviously, and I remember like you kind of getting in there and getting some rolling in with the guys and stuff like that. How was your training during that like frantic sort of pace that you're keeping up with Bellator?
How did I do?
Oh, you were tough. I was actually
okay,
I know you don't remember because I was some random guy from Kentucky, right? So but I remember actually being impressed because I was like, all right, this announcer guy, I was like, Jimmy, right? So he's the announcer guy. Let's see, because you said you were training jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. I was okay, so I rolled with him. I was like, this gets pretty tough, So like you never know, But I was like,
no, you never know. You have no idea.
Yeah, but no, you were tough.
Thank you. I tried to roll as much as possible. There's a guy, Manny Rodriguez, who was a Spanish commentator, who's a heavyweight. We used to roll all the time. And if I got lucky, I could get down there and roll. And there's people there, some fighters and their coaches and corners and stuff, and I can roll with them. But as you know, fighters can't do that much right before a fight. So I'm not always able to roll with the guys that are there. but I mean, who are there to fight. But sometimes they have cornermen and teams, and I'm able to get a workout in. But yeah, it took its toll because you're there to work, and you're not sleeping, you're traveling or whatever. So physically, you're just not. You're getting what you can in while you can, but it's never easy. So yeah.
Is there someone maybe that you saw, a fighter that you saw, or maybe even like you had a role and you're like, this person, they have something special? Was there anyone that kind of stood out to you during your time at Bellator that you thought like they'll be a champion or they're going to be really successful?
Pitbull. Patricio Pitbull. Dude, so I'm in the elevator and his brother was fighting. So Patricio was fighting. So he had time, right? And so I'm in the elevator with him and his translator and his coach, and he goes, he turns to his coach and says something, and the coach turns to me and goes, Pitbull wants to know if you want to train with him. And I said, sure, no problem. I'm an idiot. I'll do that. And so I go to my room and I changed and I go down there. And first we grappled, for maybe a half hour. The way I describe it is like grappling a fire hydrant. He's all muscle. He's 5 foot nothing. And he has, world-class level jiu-jitsu. I mean, really, really amazing. And I took his back one time and he just literally spun. Because I have nothing to hold. He's all neck. Like there's nothing. He just like tucked his arms in and rolled, and you're like, I can't. There's nothing to grab onto, And anyway, so we're rolling around. Got some great rolls in with him, and then he asked if I could hold pads for him. I said sure. I got some mini pads for speed, and I'm putting through him. And I owned an MMA gym at the time, so I just put him through my whole workout and all this stuff, and And we finish up, and I'm like, my hands are killing me, and this is a 145 pounder, and I don't think he was champ yet. He's champ now, obviously. He's double champ now. I don't think he was champ yet, but I think I don't work for Bellator anymore. I'm telling you, he's pound for pound one of the hardest punchers I've ever seen. And what I mean by that is he doesn't throw necessarily a pretty punch. I saw him knock a dude down, Justin Wilcox, I think, with a jab. Boom! And Wilcox went down off a jab. He just they're not Gordon, they're not Conor McGregor, slick, accurate. It's like, huh, and he goes boom, and you go. And I saw guys drop and look like, what the hell just hit me? Pitbull can hit, man. And mentally, I remember he was fighting Daniel Strauss. It was their second fight, and Strauss is beating the brakes off Pitbull. And it's the end of the third round, and I'm looking in the corner, and we're in commercial, so I'm not live. Nobody cares. And I'm just staring at Pitbull. And what I'm looking for is any kind of like defeat, any like, like shit, man, I'm getting killed. Nope. He was just laser focused. Next round, the Strauss went for a Kimura without guard and got choked out. And I went, the dude really believes in the 4th minute and 59th second of the 5th round, he can win. And that combined with his just natural ability, the dude's a murderer. He's an absolute murderer. So yeah, he's one of those. And I'm very lucky in my career, not just in MMA but jiu-jitsu. I got to roll Jacare and Vitor Shaolin, which was amazing. It was amazing rolling with that guy. Bibiano Fernandez and Jeff Glover and all these great grapplers. I've been very lucky. I've been able to roll with these guys.
What's it like rolling with like a guy like a Jacare or a Vitor?
Very different, and I think that's a great contrast because they're both world champions, multiple time world champions. Jacare, I tell people, it's like being in a washing machine. Like he just. I remember the first time I ever grappled, I was a blue belt, and I couldn't wait. And this is like 2004. Like
you're a blue belt?
The year he beat Drew. Yeah, and I was a blue belt or something. Was that a purple belt back?
Either way, man. At that time, that's a big deal. Holy moly!
So he grabs me. So I was like, oh, please, I gotta grapple with you, man. He goes, yeah, come on. And he grabbed me by the back of my lapel, and my face, almost hit the mat. He went, whoo, and my face almost hit the mat, and I come up and I go, I'm going for a ride. Boom, and my feet went over my head, and I land on the ground, and then you get tapped out. Like he doesn't just tap you out. It's like, and you're like, he's here, and then across, and then I'm here, and then so it's like you never know positionally where you are because his judo's so good, he's so explosive, and he's so strong that it's hard to separate all those things. Like they all kind of come to you at the same time where suddenly he's leaping over your guard and he's beside you. Shaolin was super smooth and technical, and like I didn't feel like, obviously he's strong, but I didn't feel like overpowered once. It was just whoop, now he's on top of me. And I'm like, how the fuck did he get on top of me? Like, it was a different experience. Jacare, you're like, this is gonna suck. And then you're like, you're mounted, right? With Shaolin, it was like, I didn't really feel it until zip, he's right where you wanted to be. And I was like, okay, that sucks, And so the same thing with Bibiano Fernandez, extremely technical. I didn't feel, Jeff Glover's not a strong dude by my standards. I'm a lot bigger than he is. But it was flexible, and then he's behind me. And I was like, all right, didn't see that coming. So each person has their own game and their own style. And Jacare, very much, his explosiveness and his physical strength are very much a part of his game. You can't separate one part from another, which I think is absolutely amazing. But really one of the nicest guys you could ever possibly train with him. He remembered me. And I saw him in the UFC. I said, hey, how you doing? Good to see you again, man. And I went to a seminar of his and at my old gym, and this bugged me to no end. He taught everybody, did the seminar, and he said, okay, and his English back then was really bad. It's improved a little bit. He knew almost none then. And so he fought everybody in the room and tapped everybody. But when he said, I'll fight everybody, nobody stood up. And I was a purple at the time, and I was like, all right, I got to let the black belts go first if they want to go. They sat there. Nobody moved. And I went, you pussies. And I stood up, and I walk out to the center of the mat, and Jacare turns around, and he literally starts laughing, and he points to me and he said, I knew it would be you. And it's one of the best compliments because I didn't give a shit. Yeah, he wiped the mat with me, but like, I'm not going to be a coward about it. You know what I mean? Like, we're here to learn. Like, that's what you do. So yeah, he smoked me, and then he smoked everybody. He took Jeff Glover off him like a backpack. Jeff Glover was there. That's when the time I rolled with Jeff was at that seminar, and he was able to get around Jacare, and Jacare stood up and literally did this and pulled Jeff off of that and sat like, you here, get that. Like, oh, there's a bug on my back. He literally grabbed Jeff like this and went shh like this, and then armbarred him. Yeah.
Who do you think has the best, BJJ for like martial arts, for mixed martial arts, for MMA?
MMA?
Yeah. Whose BJJ do you think is just, like Damian Maia is phenomenal, of course. Jacare is phenomenal. Is there someone that stands out to you?
Man, so many stand out to me. But I think for personally, the way I like my jiu-jitsu, I know that's a little weird. I really do like Damian Maia because he's so positionally good. He gets on top of you, and he just breaks guys. He just, I remember Frank Mir saying, I thought I knew jiu-jitsu, and then I rolled with Damian Maia, and I found that I didn't. And that's how it looks, where it's like his pressure's so good that he never gets off of you. But I think in his prime, my favorite was probably Jacare, because he was a bit more explosive than Damian Maia. He was a bit more aggressive than Damian Maia. He kind of went after a little bit more, which I think you need in MMA simply because you see with Damian Maia the limitations where he got to a certain point, and those elite guys that wouldn't get suckered in that game, who had superior wrestling, he had trouble with that. Jacare was so explosive and so aggressive and so physical that he could get past that style, and Damian Maia couldn't. So I would have to slightly give the edge to Jacare personally. That's how I feel about it.
Nice. And then going back to the color commentaries type stuff, what are some like memorable moments? I know you have plenty. Like, because again, there's probably so much in there. But is there anything that off the top of your head, story wise, that you have from that from your time in Bellator or any of the shows that you've done that really stand out to you?
A very interesting story to me was Eduardo Dantas versus Marcos Galvao, because they had come up together, and he was kind of his mentor. Galvao was Dantas' mentor, and then he ended up fighting Dantas for the title, and Dantas knocked him out. And I remember Dantas just sitting in the cage, just bawling into his hands. And then I look into the cage, and like they were all Novignon, but like Shaolin was in Marcos's corner, and I think Dede was in Dantas's corner. Andre Pederneiras, for people who don't know, and like people were crying, like the coaches were crying because like they're coaching against their friend, and like Shaolin was just like tears coming down his face because he just saw his guy get knocked out by the guy he helped bring up, and like It was tough, man. That was a tough one to watch, dude, because, if the way jiu-jitsu works like that, 20 years ago, that doesn't happen, first off. And secondly, when you meet in the finals of a tournament, the senior guy goes ahead. And so it was almost like Dantes went, no, this is a professional fight. It doesn't work that way. And they both kind of set that jiu-jitsu tradition aside and then fought, but they both hated it. And that was a tough one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a crazy situation to have to fight, like, especially not just like a training partner, but like you said, almost like a mentor to you.
Yeah, they were super tight, and to see that go down the way it did was tough, man. That was really tough.
Was that in the tournament format still? Because they met in the tournament, right? So pretty much they weren't choosing to fight each other; they kind of had to based on.
Yeah, Galvao won a tournament. Dantes was already champion. Gotcha, so yeah, once again, no choice. Galvao had won the tournament, so he gets to fight Dantes, and Dantes knocked him out. So it was absolute. I don't know, man. Just so difficult to see that on so many different levels. And another one was Dan Hornbuckle when he fought Ben Askren. And I know now we kind of see Ben Askren as one of those elite wrestlers that did great in MMA. He had like 4 or 5 pro fights. He really wasn't on anybody. People forget that. He entered that tournament as the dark horse. Nobody really thought much of Ben Askren, or that, also we didn't know how that style would translate in MMA. We used to the Matt Hughes double leg, boom, like Jordan Burroughs, that kind of takedown. Ben with his like grab you by the toe and come out behind you. We didn't know how that would work in MMA. Like we weren't sure. I'd seen him wrestle at Mizzou in the Olympics. And so I was like, I don't know if that's going to work here, where you could screw up and leave an arm behind or something. And so when he took on Dan Hornbuckle, almost everybody thought Hornbuckle was going to kick his ass. And Ben owned him. He owned him for 15 minutes. And in the beginning, Hornbuckle wouldn't touch his gloves. Says, all right, touch gloves. And Hornbuckle walked away like, F you. Well, at the end of round 1, I remember after getting his ass handed to him, he's sitting on his stool and he's just like, won't even look up. And Conan Sauvé, his coach, is trying to get him fired up. And this is a guy who's like, he had a black belt in intensity. That was like his thing. Gone. Different dude. Different guy. And to see that too, and that was kind of like the beginning of Ben Askren. That was like when he really emerged, like, oh crap, this guy might be able to do something. And because it was supposed to be Hornbuckle all the way, and it did not work out at all.
Well, like you said earlier about Maia, like a grappler that has that kind of pressure that can just basically pull you down and you can't get away from him. That has a way of breaking people.
Oh, 100%. And what was so interesting about Ben's style was he didn't do that at all. He was a transitional guy, so he was like all over you. Like he never held anything. It was like he would take you down and then grab onto something weird and then transition in some strange way. And he didn't have that like Matt Hughes, Sean Shirk, like crazy strong pressure. He really didn't. He didn't wrestle that way. He didn't grapple that way. So he was always moving, and that wore guys down, trying to like keep up with Ben and like, because he would move at these really weird times when he didn't have to, which as a jiu-jitsu guy was strange. You never move if you don't have to. And Ben did it all the time. And so that was the style that beat everyone in Bellator. And I actually thought he'd get further in the UFC, to be honest with you, than he did. And part of it was he always said, like, I'm going to do this until somebody can stop me. And always in my head I went, but when they do, you're not going to have an answer because you didn't work on it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, if you think it's always going to work, you're not doing other stuff. So I remember him boxing with Damian Maia and going, dude, you're a professional fighter. And it was horrible to watch. And I went, you really didn't spend any time on anything that wasn't wrestling because you never thought it wouldn't work, So there was that side of Ben too. This guy got a lot of confidence, and I think eventually it bit him.
Yeah, I guess you can see that it can be advantageous to be one-dimensional, to be really, really phenomenal in some aspects, but it can only take you so far because really, if somebody can stop your wrestling, there's not really you don't have any backup. There's nothing else you can do.
Think of every truly great fighter in mixed martial arts. The only thing that unifies them, right? The only thing that all of them have in common is they're well-rounded. That's it. That's the only thing. Like you look at Anderson Silva, GSP, Fedor, whoever, John Jones, whoever you put on that list, none of them are specialists. None of them were, that's the only thing I know how to do. None of them. Now, there have been specialists in MMA. They generally hit a ceiling. Like we're saying about Damian Maia. He was always there. Mm-hmm. He was never the number one guy. Ben was always there. He was never the number one guy. Whatever it is, if you're a specialist, if you're like, I do this one thing, someone will eventually stop you. Someone will eventually make you use your other skills. And when you look at the all-time greats, they're always well-rounded. Brock Lesnar became champion, couldn't hold it that long. He just didn't have a well-rounded skill set.
Yeah, not enough time to develop it. I mean, physically, he was just so much bigger, stronger, kind of than a lot of the guys. Yeah,
that'll get you to a certain point,
sure.
and also, I don't think, kind of a tangent, but I don't think if he had started at the bottom with everybody else, I don't think he gets to the top. Yeah, remember, he started out taking on Frank Mir, so like his first win. Boom, put him right to the top. And you go, well, if you had to work your way up like everybody else, you would have gotten, I think, in my opinion, you would have gotten exposed a lot earlier. Just math. I mean, you're eventually going to run into a guy who doesn't fall for that particular game plan. But when you start at the top, you can win 3 fights in a row as a physical heavyweight just cuz, right? But you're not going to beat the best of the best consistently. And one of the best things I was ever told about elite sports period was by a golfer, and he said anybody can have a Tiger Woods day. He goes, anybody can have that day where you're just boom, you're just nailing them and everything's going great and you're under par every single hole. He goes, Tiger Woods does it every freaking tournament. And this is when Tiger Woods was at his best. That always stuck with me about athletics. Maybe you get that lucky home run and boom. And I have my brother-in-law was a baseball player in college. Could have probably played the minors, and who knows, maybe touched the big leagues eventually. But he told me one time, he goes, if you dropped me when I was in college on the field for the Yankees, you wouldn't know I didn't belong for a few games. Because everybody strikes out sometimes, right?
Sure.
Some you have an off game, strike out, or as long as I didn't make a stupid error that anybody could make, you wouldn't know that I wasn't a Yankee. But 5 games when I don't get a hit. Right? When half the season I'm batting, 120, then you realize I don't belong. I can get through a game as long as I don't do anything super stupid and look like a professional baseball player. Greatness shows over time. If you put me at the top already and I'm just strong and maybe I get those knockouts because I can club somebody, you might get 3. You might get 4. You're not going to get a whole career's worth of stuff. And that's a universal period when it comes to sports. Consistency to me is just underrated. We tend to remember the spectacular performance, right? The water cooler, oh my God, this guy did this, rather than the Jose Aldos who just knocked them down for how many years? We don't appreciate those guys who go on those runs. You go, Fedor, if you look at his run in Pride, there will never be, in my opinion, a heavyweight division like Pride when Fedor was the king, right? We just won't get that many names at one time. They were all juiced. Yeah, but okay, that didn't make it any easier for him, So I think that's an underrated part of the game is the consistency it takes to really be great.
Yeah, I think you're right about Brock because I thought the same thing back then because he was just such a big draw. He's so big. It reminded me of back then. I remember I was like, he's like Bob Sapp because when Bob Sapp first went to K1, he was just clobbering people. Nobody knew how to deal with him. And then Crow Cop eventually punched him in the face. And then after that, everybody was like, oh, you can just punch him and he goes down. It's again, it's
Bald Bull.
Yeah, it's exactly right.
He looks like Bald Bull. Every time.
Kick him in the leg too. Yeah, who stopped on leg kicks?
Was it Hoost maybe?
Hoost lost to him, right?
He always had Hoost's number.
Yeah.
For some reason, Ernesto Hoost couldn't beat him.
Yeah. He was just the scariest looking guy. I mean, just he looked like he couldn't even throw a punch. He had so much. He was so roided out that I don't think he could even physically. I don't know if he could actually
his fight with Minotauro was pretty nasty.
Oh God,
power bomb.
Yeah,
dude, Minotauro in his prime was probably one of the toughest. I mean, he could take so much punishment. It was absurd.
I'm from Carlson Gracie, so that's kind of my team. I was training with Brazil Tom TV in Long Beach for a while, and it's funny. My coach there used to say, "Don't fight like Minotauro, Jimmy. Don't fight like Don't just get hammered every time you fight and then get a triangle in the last minute. You're going to be dead. It's not worth what's going to happen to your brain at the end of it." And that was, I hate it. I loved his jiu-jitsu technique, but it was also like, could you once not take an ungodly ass whooping before you get that submission? Because it just wore Minotauro down eventually.
Yeah. Well, he when he fought, you were talking about Fedor earlier. I remember watching the fight with their first fight. That one was like, I remember watching that fight, and like I'd never seen anyone do ground and pound like Fedor in that first fight, where he's jumping and throwing punches, and he'd get caught in a omoplata, bust out of it, turn back around, hit the guy again, and it was insane. Like you said, he just took so much damage in that fight.
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, it's it's one of those things where we have a love-hate relationship with that. I think fans love to see fighters put all on the line and stuff, but God, you only have so many of those in you. It's just and I've used this expression, and it's brutal, but it's true. Look, they're dying a little every time. They're dying a little bit, and to be a fight fan and really understand it, you have to understand what you're seeing, and what you're seeing is someone shortening their life to entertain you. That's what they're doing. And that's it. And they understand the risks, and we understand. I hope we understand the risks. Yeah. But you have to see that every time. And it's how much of that you want to do defines you as a person and defines your career.
It's hard to I think of it as like a street fighter, little power bar, and their power bar just slowly diminishing. And that, like, I used to love watching, as I've watched MMA for years, to me, I feel like it's harder to watch now, like a little bit. Like seeing these guys really, I almost prefer that they get on the ground and grapple. Just I feel like they're saving themselves a little bit. It's almost gotten harder for me to watch, them just beating the shit out of each other like that.
I think as you get older, I don't know if if either of you guys have kids.
Yeah. Kids.
When you start thinking about the future. You start thinking about what's going to be like, because you get older and you think about being older, I guess. I mean, like 60 didn't occur to me until I was 40, right? Like, it's just, it's how our brains work. So when you start thinking about a great quote was, do you guys know who Todd Marinovich is?
Todd
If you're not from
Marinovich.
Southern California, you might not. Yeah, the quarterback.
Yeah.
He was a quarterback at USC. Yeah, briefly played for the Raiders, but the guy was a train wreck. And there's a great documentary, the Todd Marinovich Project, it's 30 for 30. And Howie Long's on there because he played with Todd Marinovich. And he said, your sporting life is this big. The rest of your life is that big. Like, I was only, Howie Long was only a football player for a 10-year career. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And then you live till you're 70 or 80, and the rest of that time you're not an athlete. Well, that's all the time you have to live not being able to climb a flight of stairs or forgetting your daughter's name, or like, you got to deal with that forever. The glory you had and the money you had. There was a great book that I read that had a quote in it. The start of it was a book about Billy the Kid, and it said, "Fame is the food the dead eat." Where that's great when you're gone and people say all these things about you, but what about right now while you're alive, right? Like, the fact that you were a great fighter back in your day, does it help you while you're spooning baby food because your jaw's busted and you have no balance and you can't walk? You don't think about those things while you're in it. You think about those things as you get older. And I think that's why fighting gets harder to watch as you get older, because you start thinking about, man, that guy's going to have a problem. When I'm getting out of bed, I had a hip replacement last year, and no big deal. I had a hip replacement, and it worked out great and everything. But I know guys are on third, fourth, fifth knee surgery, right? How many shoulder replacements, how many this, how many that. Dude, my hip hurts me sometimes. Imagine having 2 of those things, plus a bad knee, plus a bad ankle. You start thinking about the consequences. And once you start thinking about the consequences, it's over for you. It's over for you, And so we already see that.
Yeah, when they say, I was reading a book, and it was talking about warfare, and it was talking about how the I guess like the human brain, like in us, doesn't really fully form until somewhere around like 24. So you're getting a little bit older, and like when you're younger, they were talking about if you're going to send some dudes to go charge a hill or something, you got to get the young guys to do it, because they just like when you were fighting back in the day, you just think you're invincible. You're not thinking about the future. You're just like, I'm here. Whereas the older guys, they're thinking about their families. They're thinking about, well, what if I don't make it, whatever. And it's the same way with fighting. I didn't fight at nearly that level. I had like 13 fights or something, and most of them were just sort of regional. But again, when it's one of those things where as I got older, I started to like kind of get hit and stuff, and I'm like, man, like I had this big spot in my vision for a couple hours after that last fight. That can't be a good thing, like maybe I'll just stick to jiu-jitsu. Like you said, you start thinking about the consequences of the long term, and then you kind of maybe there's something else I can do.
Exactly. And that's one of the things I love about jiu-jitsu is I can still do it today, and I have way less ego than I used to. It's way less personal to me than it used to be. It's when my instructor kicks my ass, it doesn't bug me anymore. It used to kill me when I was younger, man. And I'd go home and think about it and be pissed off and all this stuff. And it doesn't mean anything to me now. It's like, I laugh about it because it's, it is what it is. And so that's one of the reasons I really like jiu-jitsu too is, I wouldn't box now, man. I wouldn't box. Even, if I were to go to a boxing place and train, I wouldn't spar anymore. I'm not taking those tie kicks to the head and to the ribs like I used to. I'm not doing that stuff anymore. It's not worth it. I can grapple all day and be fine. And I always tell guys, well, the worst that happens is you tap. It's humiliating, like, what's it like rolling with Jacare? Well, you tap a lot. What's it like rolling with Hicks and Gracie? You just tap a lot. It's not, it's just you learn to do this all the time. That's it. You can walk off and be fine. Yeah. That's a great thing about it to me.
I'm curious, just jumping around onto another subject. You're doing this unconventional lifestyle. I consider it that, right? Because there's most of us grew up and, like you said, you were a teacher, you got the 9-to-5 kind of job. When did you find or sort of realize that you could make a living doing something involved with the thing that you love doing? Because obviously there was the passion of fighting, there's the passion of jiu-jitsu, and then you're like, you get to be like a professional sort of, I don't want to say fan, but you get to look at it and analyze it and really break it down. But essentially, you get paid to be a professional at breaking fights down and enjoying this passion. Like, when did it like dawn to you that, oh, I can like make a living doing this? Like, because that's kind of a cool thing.
First Bellator contract. That was the first one that I could like live off of, right? Because when I was doing M1, we did one every like 3 weeks or so. Like I was surviving. It was a small show, it wasn't an exclusive contract or anything. It was just a small show, and I would fly international and do it. Bellator was the first one that they kind of went, okay, you're going to work weekly, you're going to be our guy, here's the deal. And I went, wow, I can do this for a living. And it's like, this is my job. That's crazy. That was the first time it occurred to me that I could do it for a living and be okay and lead a decent life. But it's a very tough business in that regard, where you don't have the 9-to-5 security. You don't have a lot of things other people that didn't choose this life have. There's an upside and a downside. Yes, sure. I get to talk about fights for a living, but when I made the transition to the UFC, and then at the end of 2018, the UFC was like, oh, we're just using fighters from around. You don't have a job. I had nothing all of 2019. It was just a wasteland. I got dropped from the top of my profession to you don't have a career in boom like that. That's the downside. That's the downside of our business is, show me a promotion outside of the UFC that's financially secure and has always been at the same place. It doesn't happen. I mean, when I was at Bellator, we went from, where were we? It was Deportes the year before I started. Then it was Fox Sports. Then it was MTV2. Then it was Spike. Then it was Paramount. Then it's DAZN. So, and now apparently I'm reading that the DAZN deal might be over. They might have to go to not have to, but move to Showtime, whatever. That's an insecure place to be. You don't know where we're going next year, or what's going on next year, or what's happening. That insecurity is the other side of being in MMA, because it isn't like being a broadcaster in the NBA where, you're flying on a charter jet to the games, and there are a lot of channels that do the NBA, and there are a lot of radio shows. MMA is very, very small. It's a niche market, so it can be very, very tough to find. Yeah, like it's like a crack you can hold on to, right? Like a niche where you can hold on to the side. Like sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not, and there's nothing below you. That's the other side of being in MMA.
Well, tell me a little bit about what it was like not having a job. How did you go about moving forward? Was there like a type of grieving process, or were you like, man, am I doing the right thing with my life? Or how did you move forward, and how did you get the gigs that you have now?
I'm still moving forward. It's not, it's a process, and it was horrible. 2019 sucked. Like, it was just an awful year. But yeah, it's just well, the hard thing was that the contradiction of driving a lift and working on jobs to make the ends meet, and then I go to the gym to work out, and somebody sees me and they hit the roof because they're an MMA fan and they freak out, and you go, okay, like I remember one time there was a like a behind the music about like Twisted Sister, some band, and Dee Snider, who was the lead singer of that band, lost all his money and all his stuff, and he was like selling computer parts. He says, here I am broke and famous. And people are stopping me on the street, but I'm riding a bike because I can't afford a car.
Oh, man.
Like, that's what 2019 was like. Because MMA fans, I'm like a big deal. But you don't feel like a big deal. You're like driving a lift and all this stuff to make ends meet. But people go, when I did Titan Fight here in Florida as the color guy, the play-by-play guy gives me this like ridiculous intro. Like, I'm here with a broadcasting legend and Jimmy Smith, who's called fights all over the world, and American Ninja Warrior and all that. And paperwork for a law office to try and pay my rent that month. So that contrast of like the MMA community sees you as something great, but you can't work in that, was really difficult. I almost got out of MMA and just went, okay, I just got to go back to school and start teaching again, or something else, because once again, you can't eat fame. You can't eat respect in the industry. You can't pay your rent with likes. It doesn't work that way. So yeah, that imbalance really, really bothered me. I mean, 2019 was a really depressing year. And then the way it came back to some degree is I had a friend of mine who worked for ESPN International doing basically like extreme sports for them, like the X Games and stuff, and happened to be having lunch with the producers. Said, yeah, we want to do this international MMA show. We need a host. And he went, you got to call Jimmy. And she goes, I think she said like, Jimmy Smith? Can we get that guy? Yeah, it's no problem at all. Anytime you want. So she called me, and I have a weekly gig, and they were able to transition it so I could do it from home. And I got very lucky with that. SiriusXM Radio called me. Luke Thomas totally helped me out. I mean, ridiculously. And that kept me afloat through 2019 and now, just enough. Yeah, it's an ongoing process, man.
I'm curious, to myself watching you with my dad on Fight Quest, and then seeing you on Bellator and then seeing you in the UFC, commentating there. Like, I feel like you're a really huge part of MMA history, honestly. Like, where do you see yourself? Where do you I say that. Where do you see yourself in MMA? Like, what impact do you think you've made, or where do you like see in the growth of the sport?
I don't know. I have no idea because of what I went through in 2019. Like as soon as I was gone, I was gone. Like that was it. So I don't get wrapped up in those things. I know how meaningless they are. I know how meaningless it is that, boy, you're a legend in MMA. Yeah. I won't mention names, but people who currently work in the UFC, I had somebody who is currently employed by the UFC write me, and they went, God, I wish I could just, God, you're so natural on camera, and I really wish I could do it as well as you do. And she was like, you're so amazing at this, and that. And I went, yeah, that's what I tell my lift passengers. And she wrote me back, like, I'm sorry. And I go, I just don't really want to hear it.
Yeah.
I don't really. The last day I worked for the UFC on camera, and once again, I won't mention names, somebody who worked behind the camera or in front of the camera, he's like, God, man, you flow out with knowledge, and I feel like I get in my own head, and I stutter, and I don't do it right, and it bugs me. And I was like, man, it just comes with practice and all this stuff, and da-da-da-da. And, I kind of gave him that line, and I had a pretty good idea I was done with UFC by this point. And he walked off. He goes, man, thanks. And he walked off, and in my head I went, but you were a champion. You're going to get a lot of opportunities. And I knew I was done. I was like, you're going to get all the chances in the world to learn how to do this because you've got a huge name and I don't. And so that's the nature of it. Yeah.
Why did they decide to go the other way? I mean, you may not know, obviously, but
I don't know. I don't know. I was told what the phone call where they informed me I wouldn't be back took 5 minutes. I didn't, they don't send you a handwritten note, it's like, hey, we're going with UFC fighters from here on out. All right. Thanks. You know, I'm not gonna sit here and grill the guy. I don't know. You know. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. Why did they? You know, I get that all the time. Why did they do that? I don't know. I didn't make the decision. They did. You know, ask them. I have no idea. So, yeah, I don't know. So it's just one thing you move on from, and but that whole, you know, I don't know. It's that idea of you mean something to MMA history. Okay, I mean, I guess, but like, you know, I don't see that. Like, I don't know, maybe when I'm retired or something, I don't know, but like I'm more concerned about continuing with my life now and doing something. I haven't called a live fight in, you know, I don't know how long. Like, you know, when I talk about commentary, I use it in the past tense. I really don't commentate anymore, you know? So it's that contrast of like, you know, what are you to MMA? Like, I don't know what I am to MMA now, let alone like the history of MMA. I don't, you know, that's up to everybody else but me, you know?
What'd you learn from that time that you were off in 2019? What'd you learn about yourself, or kind of what you wanted?
Nothing.
You learned something, man, because you got to be pretty resilient, like to, you know, have a pretty, you know, Bellator and UFC, you know, regardless of how those things turned out, those were pretty spectacular, pretty much the highest level of doing what you can do, you know, and being at that level. What did you learn about yourself just to move on?
Well, I learned you don't have a choice. I mean, it's so like people in these like heroic situations or whatever, people survive disasters or you know, how did you survive that? And they go, well, what was my other choice?
Gotcha.
Sure, I could have burned to death inside that building, so I ran out of the thing. You know, it's not a conscious thing, and that's what I learned in so many ways. In 2019 was like, it wasn't about conscious choices. It was like, well, I just got to keep going somehow, you know, and I did. But the idea that I don't know, I learned a lot or that I grew as a person. I think in a couple of years, maybe I'll look back and go, talk about how worth it was. I'm still way too in it right now. I'm still way too in the recovery process. I'm still way too in the figuring out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life process to have that perspective yet. Ask me in a couple of years and we'll see.
Awesome.
So what kind of projects do you got going on right now? Because I know you mentioned them at the beginning of it, but tell me more about what you got going on right now.
ESPN International, I work for them pretty much every week right now, doing the Sports Center Fight Camp for them, which is basically an entity for all of the English-speaking market outside of the United States. So Hong Kong, UK, Australia, Canada. So I do like 5 intros for the show, depending on what station we're on.
Okay.
So, and I do it right from here. And then I do SiriusXM MMA Tonight. Every Thursday night is me, and I fill in for everybody all the time. So I do at least a couple weeks a week for them all the time. So yeah, those are my 2 primary gigs right now, man. And I'm doing a Titan fight at the end of the month. They're starting up back here in Florida, stuff like that. So that's what's going on right now, man.
Are you still training? Are you still doing jiu-jitsu consistently?
No, well, I mean, I'm waiting for it to open up enough for me to do that.
Well, yeah, like just before all this nonsense.
Oh yeah, no, all the time. Yeah, no, I was, you know, the regular 3 or 4 days a week, not 6 days a week like I used to when I was a maniac.
Yeah.
4 days a week to stay sharp. Oh yeah. My gym just opened up and they're just doing drills like in place.
Yeah.
Without that's what they're doing right now. So I gotta hop there and start doing that. But yeah, I've always stayed up with my jiu-jitsu.
Tell me a little bit about my background. Is I have a physical therapy degree, and I want to know about your hip replacement. How is that recovery for you? And you know, how has your jiu-jitsu maybe changed dealing with that type of surgery?
It's better now because I was in. You know, you don't realize how much pain you're in the whole time, like until you get it fixed. You're like, oh, I can walk now. Look at this. You know, I couldn't walk without limping.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff I couldn't do on the mat for years, and then I got it replaced, and the recovery was rough because not even that rough, but the pain it did cause. I talked to the doctor, and he goes, well, you got to understand, most people get hip replacements are 60. Yeah. You know, you're comparatively young. So all the muscle, you have a lot of muscle and tendons and around it. Because most of them get a hip replacement. You do. So the muscles and everything had to kind of like reset and heal up. But my jiu-jitsu is way better now because I can actually like elevate people with my right leg, and I couldn't do that before. I can move around in ways that I haven't been able to for years. So I recommend it to everybody who might be thinking about hip replacement. Man, get it done because it healed up really well, really quickly. I was thrilled.
They go through the front of your hip, kind of anterior approach. Is that what they did?
Yeah, they did. They went through the side and the butt is where they went through. That's why I have my scars. So
on the side and the butt? Okay.
Yeah, side and the butt. And then, yeah, man, I had a picture of it that I put on my social media because I had never seen it. I didn't know exactly what it was. And yeah, man, the whole cap is artificial now. It's like, apparently ceramic and plastic, and it's great. It doesn't feel, it feels stronger than my old hip.
That's awesome.
For sure.
That's
yeah,
awesome. Yeah, those surgeries they're evolving, they're getting better, and they say the hip is one of the easier ones. I'm not saying it's easy at all, but it's one of the easier ones to recover. And you actually do hear, I think we talked about Nogueira. I think Nogueira had a hip replacement. Big Nog had a hip replacement a while back. So you're still able to do a lot, with those type of surgery, which is very encouraging because like a shoulder replacement, that's something that is hard. I don't know if I've never heard a lot of people training with a shoulder replacement, but the back surgeries they're doing disc replacements now, which are a lot better for these fighters, and so I think you can squeeze out more life out of your joints and out of your body, I think, with these replacements. But
it used to be a death sentence, man. Used to be a death sentence in the 80s when, like, once you got a hip replacement, you were laid up for months and all this stuff, and it's not like that anymore. I was walking 2 days after.
Yep.
Get up. Next day I was bad. 2 days. Yeah.
Get up, go do some stairs, and get the hell out of there. That's usually how it works.
It was awesome, man. I recommend it to everybody.
Yeah. Jimmy, I think we're gonna wrap up, brother. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, or if they want to, get in touch with you or kind of find out more about what you're doing, where can they do that?
Yeah, bro. Jimmy Smith MMA on Twitter. Jimmy Smith MMA is my YouTube channel as well. Jimmy Smith MMA on Facebook. Anywhere you want. J Smith MMA on Instagram. Contact me anywhere there, guys. Much appreciate you.
Awesome, brother. Thank you for being on the show with us.
Thank you. Anytime, guys.
Yeah, dude. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. It was a fun one. It was cool talking to Jimmy, about all that stuff. I like talking to people that have done kind of unconventional lifestyles, just because I live one, and so it's always interesting to see how other people are dealing with it and doing things. So again, hope you guys enjoyed that one. Again, support the if you want to support the podcast, you can either check out our sponsors, Charlotte's Web at charlottesweb.com. Use a promo code Chewjitsu for 15% off. You got epicrollbjj.com, Chewjitsu. Everything's Chewjitsu. The promo code, so I don't need to say every time, but the promo code is Chewjitsu. epicrollbjj.com, 15% off your order. And then Jugo Play for the card game. So check it out. It's at Jugo Play, JIUGOPLAY.com. And again, it's Chewjitsu, 10% off the order. And Eugene's going to read us a story about pennies.
Oh, you going to read this? All right. It's from Chris. And the subject...
Chris.
Hey, Chris, thanks for the message, by the way. He basically said that, Eugene, I'm not sure how many people are going to take you up on your penny offer from the podcast with Chewy, but I figured I would email you and give you a penny-related story. My wife's uncle is an avid hater of pennies and has been for decades. His opinion is that they literally aren't worth the metal they are made from and should be eliminated entirely. His siblings would give him significant quantities of pennies for holiday presents, knowing it would drive him crazy, either need to take them to a bank or just have them pile up and take up space. This raises the question of how this is handled financially, especially the respect to sales tax and pricing. The quick answer is that all prices would round down to the nearest nickel if paid in cash, or it would just be a moot point if paid electronically. Or by check, where we aren't really using the pennies anyway. At that point, I guess nickels would eventually become the penny, and we would eliminate them as well. But that's a discussion for another day. And he said thanks for the podcast and everything. So, I did respond to Chris, and I said, Chris, thank you so much. That's an awesome story. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the support, but I still need that penny. So, and I sent him my address. So
we'll see if Chris.
Chris sends me a penny in the mail. And the interesting part to me is going to pay more in postage than he is for for what he's sending. But it's worth it.
You have a penny, and while it'll cost more than a penny, for only 23 cents and 3 cents, 23.3 cents a day.
333 repeating
23.3. you could have access to the Chewjitsu Patreon, which helps support the podcast to make sure that it keeps going on. So you have episodes to listen to while you're driving, while you're, in the shower, if that's what you do, or
while you're waking up in the morning.
Like if we're hanging out with you while you're sipping your cup of coffee, or you're going for a walk and you're listening to me talk to you, and at this ending, which is, I don't know how many of you guys actually listen to this thing, but obviously there's some of you guys that do, because we're talking about the pennies.
I have a funny story though, by the way, about listening to our podcast first thing in the morning. And my wife's like, why am I hearing Chewy's voice first thing in the morning?
That's funny.
So usually when I release the podcast, it usually releases on Mondays at 6:30 in the morning.
You're
so
welcome,
when I get up in the morning, I'll do whatever to get up, and then I'll double check and make sure everything posts properly, just to make sure.
Yeah.
And so I played it, and she's really in a dead sleep. She goes, why am I hearing Chewy's voice at 6 in the morning? And I was like, I'm sorry, I was trying to, but so... It's not going to be soothing to everyone in the morning, but to me it is.
One of the guys at the gym, when I played around with the podcast, this is like years ago, back in 2013, with a little project that I was doing. Like his wife was like, "Why are we listening to your jiu-jitsu coach? Because you're still relatively new. Why are we listening to your jiu-jitsu coach in bed?" So anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed this. But for 23 cents and 3 cents, I got off track. You can have access to the Chewjitsu Patreon, which has over hundreds of stuff in there.
You need to calculate how much, how much each post would cost.
I mean, God, for each post.
Yeah, I mean, math geniuses.
I mean, it would be like cents. It would be like negative cents. Because
I don't think that math adds up.
That adds up. If we can have negative prices for oil barrels, we can have negative prices for content. Literally, you're literally losing money on this deal right now. If you're not a subscriber, you're losing money on the deal, because there's so much stuff in there. There's a lot of podcast content. So if you enjoy the podcast, you enjoy the conversations, and you would like a little extra, check it out at patreon.com/the-jiu-jitsu-podcast. That's my little spiel for you today. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. Talk to you next week.